through. And as I was telling a reporter this morning when she asked why we are not yet opening our synagogue, and I said, you know, the news is changing so quickly every day. It's hard to get a handle on what's actually happening and how best to keep our members safe. And we're monitoring everything very, very closely. And we feel like it's possible we will all be gathering again, but it may be a little. I think safe, better safe than sorry is I think the leadership team's perspective. Okay, can we just get a little bit of feedback here? Are you still hearing feedback from me? Because I'm the only one not muted. Okay, people feel like Rabbi's breaking up. Should I go out and come back in? Okay, let me go out and I will be right back and see if that helps. Let's hope that this is better. Any feedback? Is it better? Okay. I don't know if it's better or not. It's better if you write it in the chat. But anyway, hopefully that is. All right, everyone. So today, what I thought we would look at is a little bit about business ethics. But as everything in Judaism, business ethics just means another form of how. But I have my camera on. Okay, I don't know. Make sure you are set to speaker view so you will only see the rabbi. That's for you, not for me. Okay, moving right along. Anyway, so business ethics is exactly about how we treat other people. And I am going to share my screen in 2 seconds. Host disabled screen sharing. Okay, I need someone to allow me to share my screen. Okay, nope. Shelly, Nina, you are now the co-host. Okie dokie. All right, here we go. Okay, so now because now you have the paper in front of you. You should only see me in a little corner now. Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Are any of our moderators on that can check and make sure? Yes, top right. Okay, now you can see. Okay, hopefully. All right, everybody. So this is how we treat our employees in a time of scarcity, but it's really how we treat others in a time of scarcity, which you'll see very quickly. So here's some issues around money to consider from a Jewish perspective, and these are all quotes from a book called Sacred Exchange, Creating a Jewish Money Ethic. You do not need to get this huge book, but you can just trust me that I took these quotes from there. I learned about the Jewish obligation to tithe in religious school right before my bat mitzvah 50 years ago. Tithing was a mitzvah that entered my heart. We had very little growing up. I worked through high school, always tithing 1/10 of everything I learned or received as gifts. When I got married, I told my husband that I planned to tithe for both of us, and he agreed. I have shared the importance of tithing with my children and my students. Content with 90%, I give God 10%, not just because it's commanded, but because it feels right. Rabbi Perlin's commitment to tithing. Is 90% for us enough, or what is enough? And you can write some comments. You know, if you have any comments, you can write them in the chat. What do you think about that commitment? Generous or excessive? reasonable. I think when we think about giving 10% of our money away for tzedakah, it seems like a lot. But when you flip it and say, but I get 90% of it, it doesn't seem so excessive. That's at least how I look at it. I can't tell if somebody has their hand raised. Does somebody have their hand raised? Trying to find that. No. Anyway, but I would guess that most of us think that it feels particularly generous or maybe even excessive. Let's see. I'm trying to get back to my screen here and I'm having trouble. Wait a minute. I'm trying to get back to my screen sharing. It says you are screen sharing, but I don't see the screen. Do you guys see it? Wait a minute, I'm gonna stop sharing and share again. Let's try this. Oh, there I am. Okay, let's try it one more time. Share screen, here we are. Okay. All right, no, we have no comments on the screen sharing. I mean, on the giving, the tithing. Nobody has any comments on that? Okay. So how does the following put what is enough into perspective? And this is a skit from George Carlin, and I can almost hear his voice. I've heard him do this before, but it's pretty funny. Although I think it's funny, but a little uncomfortable because it's so true. He says, that's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff. That's all your house is. Your house is just a place for your stuff. That's all your house is. It's a pile of stuff with a cover on it. A place to keep your stuff while you go out and get more stuff. Sometimes you've got to move because you've got to get a bigger house. Why? Too much stuff. So let's see here, chat. We have a couple of comments in the, okay. So some people said, is that 10% of all of we have? In her case, it is 10% of all that she has. Somebody else, Barbara says, reasonable. I feel tithing is whatever's comfortable for each individual. So perhaps for Rabbi Perlin, that is what's comfortable. I think we become accustomed to whatever we decide to live on. It depends on one's other obligations. 10% consistently is a great idea, not excessive. Somebody wrote, yes, yes, I see it. Oh, that means yes, you see the thing. Okay, see the chat for comments. I got it. I'm freezing up. I am so sorry. The fact that I'm freezing up, that is a that is a function of the technology, not so much of me personally. I'm not doing anything different, is what I'm trying to say. How much is enough? Let's put it this way. How many of us feel like we just, yes, if you feel like you have too much stuff in the chat, just write yes. And I'll tell you that I feel like I have too much stuff. We've gotten a couple of yeses. Some people saying no, but more yeses than nos. Absolutely too much stuff. I'll tell you the truth. Some people saying no, some people saying yes, some people saying they do have too much stuff. So I'll tell you, if you have to move, right, then you just realize how much stuff you have. Someone says they have too much stuff even after downsizing. We absolutely have too much stuff. I will tell you that the too much stuff people exceeds the not too much stuff people by about 25-1. So if you're in the smaller, if you're in the group that says you don't think you have a lot of stuff, well, then that's great, but you are by far the minority. Most everybody else feels like they're that they have too much stuff. Some of us are saying, even after they've downsized, they have too much stuff. Some people are saying they're into purging. Some people are saying they don't have too much stuff, but their spouse has too much stuff. I love that. And Marcia Moody says, we will eventually, God willing, have our rummage sale so we can get rid of all our stuff. Anyway, I think that this is particularly, I think what Rabbi Perlin writes is particularly admirable. This is something that she committed to prior to her bat mitzvah, which was over 50 years ago. And I will tell you, and this is not a secret, but she grew up with, she said we had very little, but she and her husband amassed great wealth. Great wealth, and have tithed all the way through, which is unusual for a Jewish person. So they have given away a lot. So I think it's pretty remarkable. All right, here's another one. My Zaidi, Abraham Warshilsky, gave my father a wooden box and instructed him to bury it in his grave when he died. My parents had no idea what was in it. But after Zaidi died, my father opened the box and found a large stack of paper. They were IOUs from people who owed him money he never collected. My father closed the box and buried it as instructed. So why did Mr. Warshilsky not want the IOUs collected? I mean, why did he want those debts buried away with him? He didn't need the money. Okay, good, Penny. He didn't need the money, or even if he did, perhaps he never intended to collect, right? In other words, maybe the IOUs were to make the person borrowing feel better, that they were promising to give it back. We have his kindness of giving. It was a way of helping those less fortunate, a huge heart. Barbara Dudley, do you want to unmute? You had something to say.
I think he realized he had enough, and what he valued more were the friendships or the giving, the act of giving to others when he need to collect back.
Okay, good, good. It's a little hard to hear. I know we're not having the best technology day, but yes, that it was the act of giving that was important to him. He never intended to collect. That was what made him feel good, the act of giving. Rather than, so Jane's messages, he comment is, in this, what values did he teach? He's answering question 2. He taught generosity similarly to Maimonides on charity, my favorite. Yes, he did. He taught generosity and also the importance of doing it without looking for recognition. You know, a lot of people give because, you know, then they get their name on a building, and I have nothing against people getting their name on a building, but this is sort of a different kind of giving. Good. Marsha said, you can't take it with you. No need to collect or have the family do so. He wanted to help the less fortunate. Exactly. Exactly. Think about, and this one you do not have to answer. This is a rhetorical for you to think about. Think about the priorities you put in place in your own life. Where on your list do money and financial stability rank? Where on your list does tzedakah rank? And that's just something to think about for yourself. I'm not asking anybody to, you know, to let me know, but, you know, I can tell you, like, for my sister and me, just, you know, financial stability and money are very important to her, far less than me. You know, I feel like God will provide. In terms of tzedakah, I feel like we give the same, you know. So it's just interesting. It's just interesting. Okay, good. So here's another comment from Eric Mulholland, whomever he is. It depends on where you give. Some of us help our families. Hold on to that, Sandy, because we're going to get to that, Sandy Forte. Hold on to that thought. It's easy to lose sight of the responsibility that comes with abundance. There are people who have more than I do, but still reject all calls, taxes, regulation, charity, society makes on their wealth. Nobody is self-made. We each build our fortune within a system that has been created by our common investment. But this system does not return equal rewards to each of us. For those who have built wealth, it's provided far more. We should recognize our roles as stewards of this abundance and give back with humility. And this is a quote from Torah: God did all this so you would never say to yourself, my own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me. Remember that it is the eternal your God who gives you power to get wealth in fulfillment of the covenant made on oath with your ancestors, as is still the case. So according to Deuteronomy 8, what is the source of our wealth? And do you agree or disagree? And how might, if we really believe this, how might we look upon our wealth and spend it? So what is the source of our wealth according to this biblical text? God. Good. Okay, so the source of our wealth here is God, right? So in a sense, maybe the money was just lent to us, or we are simply stewards of it, as we are of the earth, right? And it's a finite commodity, and we need to steward it so that it can be shared amongst all people. I don't think we tend to look at the earth or money in that way, but that is what Deuteronomy is teaching us. Our wealth derives from creation. We must give back. All has gone back in when we originally go anyway, right? And we're going to see a text like that too. I like that's written that God gives us the power to get wealth. Exactly. So we shouldn't be thinking of it as our own power, right? That God gives us the strength to earn wealth. Of course, there are a lot of other factors that contribute to it. Our access to good education, our access to, good jobs, etc. The source of our wealth is God, Catherine Morton says, but the mechanism of our gain is other people, the builders, farmers, teachers whose work we depend on and use as we go and come, eat, learn, and add our own part to civilization. Yes. Potsdam sing, all things come of thee, O God, and of thine own have we given thee, as the collection basket is passed. Okay, well, that is something I'm not familiar with, I must say. But okay, and what might our spending or our wealth look like if we really believed that God was its source? And if we really remembered that our wealth is derived from standing upon a whole network of people and institutions, etc., in our society, right? That we wouldn't be who and where we are financially if not for a lot of other people doing all different kinds of labor. And we're going to see that. Wealth is positive when it is understood as a blessing rather than as a sign of one's own capacity for acquisition. The corollary is that sometimes good fortune is built at the expense of others. Where do we draw the line between wealth as a blessing, wealth as a responsibility, and wealth as a moral danger? Or this one, what might showing humility around money look like? No man is an island. Good, Betsy, that was from last week. Excellent. Excellent. Right? I think that not everybody thinks about this. There are people who are wealthy who tithe, like Rabbi Perlin and her husband Gary, and there are a lot of other people who are wealthy who don't support any institutions. And of course, you can never tell anyone how to spend their money. We don't know what's in a person's wallet or bank account. And we don't know, as Diane said earlier, we don't know what other people's responsibilities are. So we can't sit in judgment, but definitely keeping in mind the needs of others. And we're going to see soon that Maimonides has something to say about that too, that the mitzvah of tzedakah requires that we look at and anticipate need of others on our own, not just that we are asked and we give, but that we see, right? So Jane says she once saw on the wall of a prominent Jewish businessman the sign, he who dies with the most wins. Yeah, I would say that's not a Jewish concept. Because I would say it's more, and we'll see this shortly in some of the Jewish texts, that's not accurate, right? Showing humility around money might look like, using it to do good and help others more, I think. Okay, here's another one. This one's pretty impactful. Years ago, waiting to pick up my son from Jewish day school, I overheard a conversation between two mothers. The first was complaining about her household help yet again. A young mother with 3 children at home, she had 2 women helping her. However, on this day, this mom felt that she was paying too much money for too little work. A bit older, the second mother listened patiently and then simply answered, "You don't need help, you need slaves." Needless to say, that response made quite an impression on me, and I hope on the first mother. That was from Mary Zamor. So the rabbis drew an even more explicit connection between wealth, moral consciousness, and social responsibility. While it is true that people have different financial needs and priorities, we're never allowed to wrong one another. In what ways does this young woman wrong her household help? Is she treating them like a commodity? Might be, might not be, right? It sounds like it because it's pretty shocking. She doesn't know how to lead. I agree with that, Paul. She doesn't know how to lead. She certainly doesn't know how to lead. She didn't understand, right? Barbara's saying she's treating them like a commodity by not understanding or appreciating their value to her household. Diane adds she devalues their humanity. Exactly. Exactly. Of course, as an employer, you're entitled to determine if somebody that you're paying for work is fulfilling their obligation. But this sort of seems like a bit of a devaluing of their humanity. I agree. What feels morally repugnant about the way the young mother values or undervalues her employees? Or why does the older mom say that she doesn't need help, she needs slaves? Good, she lacks respect. She puts them down and is disrespectful. Okay, good. And why do we treat our help as commodities? I'm not just talking about our household helpers. I'm just talking about any people that work for us. And I see this all the time, in other businesses. If people are not, if, for example, if people are not working every minute that they're on the clock, they're not fulfilling their obligation. As if they're not human beings, they're human doings, like too much time in the bathroom. She had an original agreement with them and then changes her mind. That's not right. That's a mother with 3 children and 2 helpers. It's excessive. Sometimes when we're busy, we simply feel entitled, utterly spoiled. Okay. All right. So it's just, I think she has no role models for humanity in her life. I agree. And I think she just has lost all perspective. If she's reacting from her own fear or from her own overwhelm. Yes, Elizabeth, I think so. From her own, or maybe even a place of scarcity. It seems to me if she can afford 2 helpers to help her with 3 children, and she's obviously not working herself, that she's probably not, in a position of scarcity. Abby says maybe she's a new mom. There's never enough help. It doesn't say they're infant triplets, but we still don't know. Poor self-image, all of the above. I mean, there could probably be a way to couch it in with a little bit more gratitude and compassion, and to talk with the people helping her about what it is that she would like from them, rather than just complaining to other people, etc. The second mother trying to make an extreme point? I guess she was. I mean, I think she was trying to shock the young mother into perspective, into having some perspective. I agree, Linda. She doesn't recognize the value of their contributions. So it's just something to think about. And I see this all the time. So it's just something to think about. Okay, here's another one. And I think this is important because it puts a little bit into perspective what Judaism has to say about acquiring wealth. The speaker in Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, that's in the Tanakh, in the books of the writings. And in Hebrew, it's Kohelet, and it's the scroll that we read on Sukkot, just to put it in perspective. The speaker in Ecclesiastes describes his drive to accumulate wealth. I multiplied my possessions, I built myself houses, and I planted vineyards. I laid out gardens and groves. I constructed pools of water. I bought male and female slaves. I also acquired more cattle. I further amassed gold and silver and treasures of kings. I gained more wealth than anyone before me in Jerusalem. I withheld from my eyes nothing they asked for and denied myself no enjoyment. Rather, I got enjoyment out of all my wealth. So is there anything wrong with Ecclesiastes' accumulation and use of his wealth or enjoyment of it? Like, is there, in this passage, is there any negative judgment on it? Shelley writes, the young mother was a bad role model for her children. Probably. They'll probably grow up entitled too. Only wrong if that's all he does. Exactly. There's nothing in Judaism that says you can't be wealthy. Nothing at all. But of course, there is a requirement to give back as well. The suggestion is tithing, but certainly, nobody, like I said, nobody looks at somebody else's bank account and says, you're giving 4% and not 10, But in chapter 6:2, so this is a little later on, Ecclesiastes realizes that pleasure is all he got from his wealth, and that wealth was transitory, and that eventually it would pass to someone else, right? Jane, this is with the sign, the person who dies with the most wins. Not true. That's not what our texts teach us. Worse still, he discovers that wealth does not make a person happy. And it is true. Every study has borne out that after a certain point, meaning, of course, there's a difference between comfortable and impoverished, but beyond being comfortable, there's a point at which being more wealthy doesn't make you happier or doesn't make you happy. It might make you comfortable, but not happy. So what is it then that makes us happy? If money doesn't bring lasting happiness, what does? A sense of belonging. Good. Being a part of something greater than yourself. Giving to others. Good. Excellent. Making life easier for someone else. Exactly. A sense of purpose. Excellent. Relationships. Outstanding. All outstanding. Relationships. Making memories with the people you care about. These things bring lasting happiness. Even giving to others in need really brings much more lasting happiness than acquiring things for ourselves. I mean, Carlin's skit about stuff is cute, but it's true. The more stuff, having more stuff does not ensure happiness. Good. Family, recognition of the wonder and beauty of creation, the company of family and friends, especially now. Purpose. Exactly, Diane. And loving relationships. Belief in something larger than oneself. All of the above. Then why do so many of us consume way more than we need and give far less away to those who could really use it than we can? I think we think in the moment that this thing, whatever the thing is, will give us happiness. It can be a scarcity mentality. It could be greed. It could be an effort to run away from what's really bothering us. It could be capitalism and a culture of individualism, all of the above. We learned last week, right? Property, greed, slavery, etc. Those were all trying to fill a sense of emptiness, that those were all systems that we inherited from, English law, that that's sort of the pinnacle, right? Acquiring property, hence slaves or stuff. Yes, slavery is immoral no matter how you slice it. There was slavery in the Bible. There are some ways in which slaves are safeguarded, more so than in other Near Eastern cultures at the time, but we could have a whole discussion about that, but we're not going to now because it's a different topic. But yes, trying to fill a sense of emptiness. Correct, Jane. What do you think of this Talmudic answer? The answer of why we consume way more than we need and give away far less than we can. So our rabbis taught who is rich. Rabbi Meir said one who is content with his wealth, right? Meaning no matter how much you have, you're content with it. Rabbi Tarfon said one who has 100 vineyards, 100 fields, and 100 slaves working in them. So what's the difference between Rabbi Tarfon's answer and Rabbi Meir's answer, right? Rabbi Tarfon is from the one who dies with the most wins mentality, right? Rabbi Meir is the one who's content with his or her lot is the one that's happy or rich, right? Rabbi Akiva says one who has a wife whose deeds are beautiful. And this one, of course, is hilarious, but true. Rabbi Yossi says one who has a privy close to his table, meaning you don't have to come look for a restroom. You don't have to go far to find a restroom. But those are four totally different kinds of answers, right? One is, I would say, philosophically, the best of all, right? That you're content with your lot. One is, about amassing wealth. One is about considering good deeds like mitzvot and tzedakah to be beautiful. And the other one's utilitarian, right? If you have what you need, that should make you happy or rich, right? If you just have your basic needs met. Somebody said, Ruth said, a deficiency of self-worth, right? That's another reason for why we amass more than we need and give away less than we can. Okay, because some people think, the bigger the house, the better the car, the more the whatever, that somehow they feel better about themselves. And of course, you can't go into a person's psyche and try to understand, why people make the decisions they did. This one's a sad one, but it's true, so I share it. My spouse and I had a wonderful house. This woman has a female partner, so in case that confuses you. My spouse and I had a wonderful house. I worked 5 to 7 part-time jobs as a rabbi while she had a full-time job. Her employer, a synagogue, needed to make some financial adjustments and came to each staff member to negotiate. She asked that her cut be taken from non-salary benefits. Sadly, they refused. Her salary was cut and we were unable to keep making our mortgage payments. We tried selling our house, but the bank refused to accept a short sale. When I got a job out of town, we simply walked away. As the bank kept coming after us, we had no choice but to file for bankruptcy. Thank God it was only money. And that's Rabbi Robin Nafshi. So, there are so many things we could say about this, but do we think that the synagogue employing the rabbi's wife behaved ethically, or can we even, right, we don't have enough information. Exactly. I was going to say, or can we even make a determination with the information we have? How do we weigh the needs for financial adjustments when others' livelihoods depend upon their paychecks? These are very hard decisions to make, right? Because today, anybody, many people are struggling, and their businesses are struggling. And so, there are a lot of decisions that have to be made about whether to let people go, whether to furlough them, whether to keep them on. These are just extremely difficult decisions. And we're going to look at a scale in a couple minutes about how we might make some of those determinations by Jewish values. But it's a very difficult question to answer. the synagogue had to try, or the synagogue had at least to try to have gone the extra mile, right? And according to this woman, they did not, although she doesn't really sound angry or spiteful in her account. She's pretty matter of fact about it because she agrees, thank God it was, she says at the end, thank God it was only money. You know, I would put her in the category of the one who said, as long as you have a privy next to your table, you're rich, right? She was sad that they had to leave, but she also, it sounds like that money wasn't as important to her maybe as other things like health or having her family intact. It was somebody wrote it, it was a chutzpah situation. She should have used it. I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that. If you want to expound a little bit, then you could write to me privately again. All right, let's go on Torah texts. So, yeah, they and the bank put the couple in a world of hurt. I agree. It was a very sad situation. While laws and rules are important in employment law, I expect more from a Jewish organization, especially a synagogue. Okay, I'm getting clarification. It was a chutzpah situation, meaning she should have spoken up that she had a specific goal and demanded that the synagogue honor it. I see what you're saying, that, you know, we cannot live with less than this. Right, and they may have negotiated differently had they known that. We don't know that they did or they didn't, but now I understand. Thank you. Okay, so this is the case of Abraham and his desire to buy a burial place for his wife Sarah. So I'm gonna summarize a little because, you know, the passages are long, but when Sarah was 127 years old, she died in Kiryat Arba, which is now Hebron in the land of Canaan, and Abraham proceeded to mourn for her and bewail her. Then he rose from beside his dead and spoke to the Hittites, saying, those are the people who live there, I'm a resident alien among you. Sell me a burial site among you that I may remove my dead for burial, right? He wanted to buy a burial plot, essentially, because he didn't own any land in this town or amongst these people. And the Hittites said to him, hear us, my Lord, you are the elect of God among us, right? God chose you, Abraham, to be the first Jew. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold its burial place for you from burying your dead. In other words, you don't need to buy the land. We'll give you a burial plot wherever you want. But Abraham bowed low to the people of the land, the Hittites, and he said to them, if it is your wish that I remove my dead for burial, you must agree to intercede for me with Ephron, son of Zohar. Let him sell me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of his land. Let him sell it to me at the full price for a burial site in your midst. Why is it so important to Abraham that he buy the burial site and not just accept a burial plot as a gift from the Hittite people or a Hittite person? Why? Okay, so Elizabeth says he paid more than it was worth, so there would be no later litigation. Okay, any other ideas? Why didn't he just accept it as a gift? Oh, sorry about that. I gotta turn this off. Okay. So the price he pays will help others. He felt it was respect for the deceased. Okay, all of the above, but likely he wants to own the responsibility for his wife. Okay, good. But likely he wanted to own the plot free and clear, exactly. Like was said by Elizabeth, like Barbara said, he didn't want there to be any question going forward. He was an honorable man. He had humility and he didn't want to feel more entitled than anyone else, exactly. He wanted to do it the right way and he didn't feel more entitled than anyone else. So basically Ephraim sells him the burial place for 400 shekels of silver at the going merchant's rate. They've done research, as Elizabeth said, and it seems that that was higher than the going rate, but nonetheless, he paid it. And so Ephraim's land in Machpelah near Mamre, the field with its cave and all the trees, anywhere within the confines of the field passed to Abraham as his possession in the presence of the Hittites of all who entered the gate at the town. And then Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of Machpelah, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Thus the field with its caves passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site. You should all know at a time when it was safe to go to Hebron, I actually did go to Hebron and visited the cave of Machpelah, because except for our matriarch Rachel, all the other matriarchs and patriarchs are said to be buried in that cave. So of course I wanted to visit. It still exists today, that cave of Machpelah, but it's really not so safe to go there. But what values about money does this exchange teach us? He didn't want to accept their charity. Good, Shelley. Any values about money that this teaches us? Perhaps all the things that you've said, right? That it's important to pay a fair price. Good. Abraham didn't want to be perceived as separate from other people in the area. While different in religion, he didn't want to appear separate from his neighbors or holier than thou or whatever. Sometimes it's worth spending money beyond all else. Equity, good, excellent. A lot of different values, right? Beware of gifts, they may have strings. Yes. But how about, we need to pay a fair price for things that are important to us. He wanted a contract, so it was legally his. Good. Okay, these are all Torah texts. I don't remember if I read the title for you, but this, I think we had this last week in a different context, but you shall not steal, you shall not deal deceitfully or falsely with one another, you shall not defraud your neighbor, you shall not commit robbery. The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning. And I underlined it because then we have commentary. The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning. The Mishnah, commenting on this verse, says, not only is this a biblical commandment to pay wages at nightfall for work done during the day, but also there are many other provisions in the halakha, Jewish law, for the protection of labor. So there's a lot of protections in Judaism for labor, a lot. And what way does this law protect workers? Or why did the authors of the Torah find it necessary to legislate the protection of workers? I mean, doesn't it seem obvious? Someone works for you during the day, you pay him at the end of the day. As I've mentioned in weeks past, none of these laws are proactive. They're all reactive, meaning the rabbis saw laborers being exploited. And so they wrote legislation ensuring that people could not exploit their employees, right? Yes, it's part of all states' labor laws that wages, as opposed to salaries, be paid within a short time. Timeliness is important. Life may depend on it. We're human, not slaves. People deserve to be paid for their work in a timely manner. A day's work reserves a day's wages. They need their money at the completion of a job. It's only fair not to make them wait to feed their families, to ensure they would receive the money, a sign of respect for all, including laborers. Exactly. All of the above. And the reality is not everybody was following these what I would call kind of ethical precepts. So what false assumptions are we under when we think we can oppress or mistreat laborers? I'll give you one that's totally, how about sending frontline workers into hospitals to care for COVID patients without the proper protective gear? Is that oppressing and mistreating laborers? I think it is. I think when we don't consider, this will be in my sermon Friday night, but the people who do the menial tasks that make it possible for us to live, right? Like the truck drivers who drive food to the supermarkets, the people who clean the hospital beds and bedpans and etc., right? When we don't recognize their humanity and treat them accordingly, that we're simply, like as Jane's writing, if we believe we're simply entitled to their efforts, their time, and their sacrifice without consequences or obligations to support and protect them, we're devaluing their life, right? We're not appreciating them. And what if those people are decimated? They're already dying in far greater numbers, right, to their percentage of the population. It's the basis for racism. Exactly. When you treat people like commodities, it's the basis of racism. It is. So it's not only, we can define laborers in many different ways. We really need them as much as we need us, right? Remember that text up above where from Deuteronomy, where the guy from Los Angeles was saying, that we don't realize that our wealth is not acquired just by our own power, that there's a whole network of individuals and institutions and organizations and individuals that our wealth is based on. We lose track of that. Right. Some here want their housekeepers they want their housekeepers with the total risk that they're not willing to take for themselves. Exactly. So, okay. And then when a stranger resides in your land, basically it's the same thing. You have to treat him or her the way you treat, your own family members. Or like one of your citizens, you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And then you shall not falsify measures of length, weight, or capacity. You should have honest weights and honest measures. And it gives you both for dry weight measures and for liquid weight measures. It says, I am the Lord who freed you from the land of Egypt. You shall faithfully observe all my laws and my rules. I am the Lord. How do the following two commentaries explain why it's so important to treat others, particularly strangers, well? Love him, the stranger, as yourself. Do not say, just as I have been humiliated, let my fellow be humiliated too. Just as I have been cursed, let my fellow be cursed too. Said Rabbi Tanchuma, if you act like this, know who you are humiliating. He made them in the likeness of God, meaning he made the strangers in the likeness of God, or he made humanity in the likeness of God. So who are you diminishing if you mistreat others, strangers, any other humans? You're diminishing God, right? You're diminishing that divine in the world. And Franz Rosenzweig said, he, the stranger, is like you, a you like you and I, a soul. Right? It's a human being. It's a soul. Those who care for the very young and old are highly unrecognized in our society. That is very true, Betsy. Honest weights and measures. Integrity in business dealings is one of the components of holiness. Why do we say it's one of the components of holiness? I understand when we say, oh, it's one of the components of, ethical treatment of others, but what makes it a component of holiness based on the text we read? Because we're created in the image of God, right? Right? We can't cheat others to be godlike, right? Elizabeth Murphy says, as Gertrude Stein should have said, a nefesh is a nefesh is a nefesh, right? She said, a rose is a rose is a rose, but it's the same idea. I'm holy, so you must be holy, God said. Fairness, honesty, concretely acted upon, exactly. And that's it. I am the Lord your God who freed you from the land of Egypt. God's reality and his redemptive works provide the authority for the exacting demands made in this chapter. How is this so? Does it work in our world? Remember, after every few commandments, it'll say, keep the Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Love thy neighbor. I am the Lord your God, right? They're always connected. These commandments, they're not just good ideas. They come from God, right? This is what is required of us. If we want to know what's required of us as Jews, we do not have to listen for voices. We have it right in front of us. It tells us black fire on white fire, how the Torah is written, but we have it right in front of us, right? There are more important things than our stuff. It's right in front of us. That this is what it means to be holy. This is what it means to live in God's image. This is what God expects and demands of us, no less. So no, as someone said before, beyond tithing, of course, we're not counting anybody else's money, but they may not be recognizing what it is that God wants of them. Okay, this is very important. This is actually from one of this week's 2 Torah portions. This is from Bahar. We have another double portion, Bahar B'chukotai. So let me just talk you through what this is. So they had this concept in Judaism of Shemitah, that every 7 years the land was to remain fallow. Right? They figured out a lot of things to protect the environment, crop rotation, not planting 2 seeds in one hole. I mean, they had all kinds of different things that they figured out to preserve the earth. One of the things that they figured out was that every 7 years, the land had to remain fallow. You could eat whatever grew on it, from seeds that were germinated from years before, but you couldn't replant. You have to do, like we do, like farmers today do. They rotate which fields they plant on so that they leave some land fallow. But that was an innovation, but not such an innovation. But the big innovation was they created something called a Yovel, a Jubilee year, which was every 7 times 7 years plus 1. So every 50th year, all debts were remitted. All debts were remitted. So let me just find this to you. Okay, so the first one was about the Shemitah, the 7th year that the land had to remain fallow. Here comes the Yovel. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. Then you shall sound the horn loud. The horn is a shofar. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, the Day of Atonement, you shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you shall return to his holding, and each of you shall return to his family. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow, neither shall you reap the aftergrowth or harvest the untrimmed vines, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You may only eat the growth direct from the field. In this year of jubilee, each of you shall return to his holding. When you sell property to your neighbor or buy any from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another, but the land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. You are but stranger residents with me. Throughout the land that you hold, you must provide for the redemption of the land. So what is this concept of Yovel, and why was it so radical? If you understood what I just raced through reading. Why was it so radical? What is it saying, basically? It's saying basically that if you're in debt, or what do you call that kind of servitude, where you're working to pay off debts as opposed to slavery, right? Indentured servitude. Thank you, Tommy. Right. Everything goes back to its origin, right? It actually doesn't, eventually it goes back to God, but it goes back to you. So you're freed, basically. Wow, the original worldwide Shabbat, environmental stewardship, total restoration, and reset, exactly. And I don't know exactly where I have it here. Oh yeah, here it is, number 2. This concept presents a business or ownership paradigm that it is not acceptable for a family to live in perpetual servitude or to be weighed down by debt and infinitum. Why did the framers of the Torah find this unacceptable? Because basically, you're enslaved, right? If you have that kind of debt on you, I feel terrible for all these college and grad school, graduates who have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They're their whole life. It's going to take them, I don't even know how many decades to pay back these loans. They're never free. But the Torah recognized, right, don't do unto others what's despicable to you, that you can't live like this. Like, our state of being is not to be perpetually enslaved. There has to come a point of reset. But when it says, do not wrong one another, or you shall not wrong one another, what does that mean? It means you can't charge an exorbitant, right, that the community takes care of each other, that you don't cheat each other, right, that you don't accept a huge loan in the 49th year knowing you won't have to pay it back in the 50th, right? Or that someone doesn't make you a loan if you're in desperation because it's the 47th year and they know they won't get it back in the 50th. I mean, it is predicated on the honor system. Now, here's just a little tidbit of information. You shall proclaim release or dror throughout the land. This verse is traditionally rendered proclaim liberty throughout the land, but the term release is more precise and closer to the meaning. Moreover, the fact that this verse was inscribed on the Liberty Bell, this is where the verse on the Liberty Bell comes from, which announced the signing of the Declaration of Independence, might suggest to the modern reader that liberty here refers to national autonomy or to civil rights, neither of which the authors had in mind. What did the authors have in mind? What kind of release are they talking about here? Good. Linda had written about the previous one, not to wrong each other, not overvaluing your land. Release from debt, release from Britain. Okay. Although this is, oh, you're talking about okay, yes. So that release from Britain, that's what the framers of the Constitution had in mind. Yes. But I was thinking more, what was it that the authors of the Torah had in mind? Were slaves to be freed? Slaves had an opportunity to be freed every 7th year, Alice, and they have an opportunity to be freed, and but there's some stipulations that go with it, like if they came with the wife, they can leave with the wife. But if the wife was given to them while they were enslaved, they can't leave with the wife. If they came with children, they can leave with the children. But if the children were born, from a wife they received while they were enslaved, they can't leave with the children. So then there's a provision if they don't want to leave because their wife and children are there, they can stick their ear up to a door and they pierce it, etc. So it sounds like our debt of college loans, it would be all nice if at a special time school loan debt would be forgiven. That would be nice. Yes, there's always stipulations. But this is really more, I think, about personal freedom, right? The Torah is talking about personal freedom, whereas the Liberty Bell is more about national autonomy, right? About the civil rights of like a whole people, not necessarily specifically of an individual. But I think you could also interpret them as the same. You could say, oh, well, the liberty refers to the civil rights of an individual, and maybe it's closer to the release of debts that is in the Yovel, the Jubilee year, than not. So the biblical mitzvot of Peah, that's leaving the four corners of your fields fallow, and the sabbatical and Jubilee years help to prevent poverty and allow for compassion for the poor, and these are central teachings of the rabbis. So how central is our commitment to the financial well-being and compassionate care of our least paid workers? We talked about this: secretaries, janitors, religious school teachers, those who are likely living paycheck to paycheck and at greater risk for the virus. And what happens in our society if these people are decimated? Got it, Connie. And we talked about that already, right? The whole, everything crumbles. We rely on them as much as they rely on us. Deuteronomy 15:7-8 teaches, if there is a needy person among you, one of your kin in any of your settlements in the land that the Eternal your God is giving you, you do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kin. Rather, you must open your hand and lend whatever is sufficient to meet the need. So in rabbinic literature, when it came to wealth, on the one hand, the rabbis were aware that acquiring wealth in the real world might involve engaging in compromising activity, possibly including the oppression and exploitation of others. On the other hand, there's nothing inherently wrong with acquiring wealth in Judaism, so long as we open our hands and our hearts to the needy. So these are more rhetorical questions, like to what extent do we open our hands and hearts to those in need? Is it ever okay to harden our hearts or shut our hands to the needy? In what ways might we engage in compromising activities, as in oppressing, compromising, or exploiting those who work for us? What if our businesses were struggling financially or we were in dire financial straits? It's all, these are all very complex questions. Somebody said when they were a waitress, they found Jews to have great empathy and be good tippers. Shelley said we need everyone to earn a living wage and we should give to organizations to help the needy. Okay, great. So I'm going to rush through this part right here. So here's some things. I want to really get to the next one, the B list more than the A list, but Maimonides has a ladder of how you prioritize who you should give tzedakah to first. So the first people are pidyon shvuyim, the ransom of captives, because that could be a matter of life or death, right? Redeeming a captive, they could be killed, in the time that it takes you to make a difference. Of course, we don't have this so often, but like Israel has it, right? When they want to bring back a soldier, or most of the time a soldier's body, and how much is worth giving to redeem or ransom those captives or those captives' bodies so they can have a proper burial. It's very difficult, a lot of times when they say we don't negotiate with terrorists, we say the same thing, but then when they do, a lot of times people really, a lot of people are released in the exchange who are really murderers, and then they're right back out on the street, to do it again. So the first one is pidyon shvuyim. Yes, Jane, we will get right on that. The second one is keeping oneself out of poverty, right? That's for yourself. Jewish tradition frowns on excess, even excess tzedakah. Our first responsibility after redeeming captives is to care for ourselves, right? We just have to decide in caring for ourselves how much is enough. That's the hard thing. 3, close relatives who need assistance in order of closeness are the next. Paying the rent or food for a relative who cannot work fulfills this kind of tzedakah mitzvah. Money given to an adult child for education to keep them on the right path qualifies as this kind of tzedakah. The next is poor members of one's household, including servants. Beyond their fair wage, we should also be sensitive to their misfortunes and illnesses and assist where we can. This, I kind of feel like goes back to, the synagogue that, negotiated salary with this woman, and her family ended having to declare bankruptcy and lose their house and everything. Maybe there was another way, maybe. Poor members of one's house. Okay, the needy who live nearby in order of closeness, like supporting employees. The needy who live nearby in order of closeness, like supporting our local food bank and local organizations that serve the poor. Then the needy who live far away. Does this shed any light on how we should treat our employees when times are tough? How about how the young mother treats her household help? And let me read. Yes, we're going to look, Elizabeth, at this whole idea of that the Maimonides had of the highest level of giving is teaching someone to be independent or earn a living independently. Nancy or Jay saying Kemach in Torah, when there is no bread on the table, the study of Torah and tzedakah become a lower priority. Absolutely, absolutely. Of course, if it's between having bread on the table and giving tzedakah, there is no question that you need to have bread on the table. I just think there's degrees. Okay. What considerations ought to be taken into account when giving tzedakah to individuals? And this, I think, is a nice, nice set of criterion to consider. How immediate is the need? What do I believe could happen if they, the person or individual family, does not receive my tzedakah now? Is a life at stake? Right? Life, life and death are always like the first priority. What other sources of help are available to them, and how quickly can they be depended upon to act? How do their needs compare to other requests currently before me? Do my feelings about them influence me for or against them? If so, should I consider consulting with someone whose judgment I trust? Or I would say, or someone who's less biased. How can I help them while preserving their dignity? And Elizabeth, here's what you were asking. Number 6, can I help them in such a way that they will achieve independence and not need help again? And Maimonides praises the giver who does not wait to be asked. This in particular I like. In dealing with people near to us, like family members or members of the household, including people who work for us, part of the mitzvah of tzedakah is keeping our eyes open for need. Right? Seeing where there might be a need ahead of time. Okay, and the last Jewish text, which is our sages teach the wheel of fortune is ever revolving. How might we consider treating our own employees who come into hard times? Do we have an obligation of them to the detriment of our businesses, or to taking home a little bit less for ourselves? One of the things we've heard is that there are people in line for the soup kitchens today who, a month or two ago would never have needed that kind of help. Number 6 sounds like Ort. I'm not sure, Carol, how that is, but I believe you. We just never know. So I want to just end with this quote from Brené Brown. It's from her book, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. Full disclosure, I have the book, but I have not read it. So, anyway, over the past decade, she's writing before the coronavirus, but I think this is so relevant. Over the past decade, I've witnessed major shifts in the zeitgeist of our country. I've seen it in the data, and honestly, I've seen it in the faces of the people I meet, interview, and talk to. The world has never been an easy place, but the past decade has been traumatic for so many people that it's made changes in our culture. Excuse me, I'm having a hot flash. From 9/11, multiple wars, and the recession to catastrophic natural disasters, which I would consider the coronavirus, and the increase in random violence and school shootings, we've survived and are surviving events that have torn at our sense of safety with such force that we've experienced them as trauma, even if we weren't directly involved. And when it comes to the staggering numbers of those now unemployed or underemployed, I think every single one of us has been directly affected or is close to someone who has been directly affected. If not before, that's certainly true now, right? Worrying about scarcity is our culture's version of post-traumatic stress. Scarcity thrives in a culture where everyone is hyper-aware of lack. We see this in the hoarding of toilet paper and paper towels. Everything from safety and love to money and resources feels restricted or lacking. We spend inordinate amounts of time calculating how much we have, want, and don't have, and how much everyone else has, needs, and wants. The greatest casualties of a scarcity culture are our willingness to own our vulnerabilities and our ability to engage with the world from a place of worthiness. After doing this work for the past 12 years and watching scarcity ride roughshod over our families, organizations, and communities, I'd say the one thing we have in common is that we're sick of feeling afraid. We want to dare greatly. We're tired of the national conversation being centered on what should we fear and who should we blame. We all want to be brave. We all want to dare greatly. So I wrote, how does Dr. Brown's perspective resonate with what we're experiencing today? I think that's pretty obvious. If we weren't experiencing a feeling of scarcity before, we're certainly experiencing it now, right? Just even this whole with the safety, with the masks and the tests, and I mean, it goes on and on. What would be her advice on what to do when our fear of not having enough terrifies us into contracting our businesses or synagogues or lives? What practically, how do we be brave and dare greatly? Where is that faith and hope? How do we be brave and dare greatly? A leap of faith, prayer, basing it on our experience that we will be okay because we've been okay. We've been in tough times and been okay before. I have recommitting to our faith in God, self-advocacy. God will see, we believe God will see us through. Having a great rabbi and cantor helps. Thank you, Carol. Let the important become truly important. Love and need of each other. Beautiful. We should give out, send out, empathize, compassion, reaching out, giving rather than fear and withdrawal, opening ourselves to others. I mean, I think things like coming together for this class, you know, or coming together as we do for worship, for the myriad of ways in which we keep living, you know, keep striving, keep hoping, I think are all ways to be brave and dare greatly. Continue to take care of ourselves and others, wear masks, keep our restrictions even though we may not want to, dare to be safe. My mother has a saying that comes to mind, if it doesn't seem relevant, if money can't fix it, it's not a problem. That's what the rabbi said, who had to declare bankruptcy. Knowing it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, finding ways to live each day to its fullest. Yes, there will come an end. It may take a while, but I do believe that we will have, that we will eventually have a vaccine. You know, this is not, we are in a much different place medically and scientifically than we were 100 years ago at the time of the Black Plague. Right, when it had the thing had to burn itself out. This is different. We thank God for that. There's also ways for people who are doing this kind of work to communicate with each other, etc. Right, to work together to help humanity. Another, okay, this was somebody's first life and lunch and learn. Welcome, welcome. Yours just says iPad 6, but welcome, welcome. Awesome lunch and learn. Connection is beautifully healing. Yes, it is. Life-changing learning. Thank you. And I promise we will get out to you all the sheets from this week and from last week. I just ran out of time at another meeting. Well, anyway, every day is a new day with lots of new things. You're very welcome, everyone. You're very welcome, and I love all of you. I look forward to seeing you at different points during the week. For the women in Musar, I'll see you tonight as we talk about humility. For those who do Torah study, I'll see you tomorrow. For Shabbat, Friday night and Saturday, we're around. We're around. You are so welcome, everyone.